Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at the astrology for the month of January. I'll be joined by my hosts, Alexandra and Whitney, to break it all down for you. But I am making this introduction today to update you all on the Kickstarter campaign, as we are in the last hours of the campaign and still have a ways to go, hoping to rally a lot of support. So I'm going to tell you about that, and then we'll get into the astrology of January. So as always, remember to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections. Tell us what your biggest transits of the year might have been. We'd love to hear from you all here as we're getting ready to start a new year. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Now, as of today, we have just today and tomorrow left in the Kickstarter campaign. We are at critical mass. We are trying to get to 1,937 backers. As of the time that I am recording this introduction, we are getting close to 1,300 backers, which means we still need over 600 today and tomorrow to come through. That's a lot. I know that we're standing, there's a ways to go. I really think we can get there, though. You'll find a link to donate and support the Kickstarter, and every single donation counts. $5, $10. The total number of backers is important to us. And we know that if we get to that number, we're going to be in the range that we need financially. And so we could really use your support. Find the link in the comment section pinned to the top in the description of this video, or head over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, and click on the 2025 Kickstarter link. So when you're taken over there, you will see, I'll show you what you'll see. You will see some boxes on the right-hand side that allow you to pick rewards. At the end of today's video, I will tell you all about the rewards that are available, including all of the best sales of the year on our astrological courses and programs, masterclasses, your 1, 2, 3, and horary programs. All sorts of really good stuff available. Our Roots and Spheres Moon Circle 2025 Masterclass Series, 23 or 24 Archived Masterclass Series. So a ton of really good rewards. But also a $5 donation does a lot as well. I'll tell you about those rewards that are available when you support the channel at the end, again, of today's video. You'll see if you scroll down right here, you'll find all of the different rewards that are available when you donate. And then at the very bottom, you'll find the best deals of the year on our classes, which you will see with the Attend 1 class, Attend 2, Attend 3, or 4. If you get to that 4-class bundle, you're saving about 75% off. But either way, a big thank you to the people who have already donated and supported the campaign this year. Again, we're closing in on 1,300 backers as of the time that I'm making this. That's a lot. That's an amazing number. Last year, we had 1,936 backers. This year, we're seeing if we can match or beat that total. So we've had 12,000 new subscribers, almost 13 in the past year. We're hoping that that means we can build a similar amount of support and keep supporting all the things we do. The staff, of course, this is how I earn my living. This is also a big part of how we support need-based tuition, need-based astrology services. The success of the Kickstarter supports a lot, including the free daily content that you receive in 2025 year-round. My promise to you is to keep showing up and making the most beautiful, insightful, fun content to accompany you through the year ahead. So on that note, thank you again to everyone who's donated. Pitch in if you haven't yet. Let's see if we can get there. And I hope you'll enjoy today's exploration of the astrology of January. Bye, everyone. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to welcome Alexandra and Whitney back. Hello.
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 Good to see you guys again. Are you excited to look at the first month of the new year?
Happy New Year, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Even though we're recording this in December, Happy New Year.
It's fun to, like, one of the things that I love about the first month of the year is really that, you know, for a lot of us, the things that happen in the early part of the year sort of set the tone for the rest of the year. You could even look at that from the solstice onward. But I feel like, I don't know, going all the way back to when I first started listening to astrology or taking astrology content in, January forecasts were always my favorite because it kind of felt like it encapsulates something about the birth of the new year, you know?
Yeah,
Right,
it's always, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's like the new moon of the cycle, kind of, right? But the cycle is a year, not a month.
Yeah, and we have many big transits this year that I am excited to look at together. I mean, all of the slow-moving outer planets are changing signs. We've got Jupiter moving into Cancer in June. We have Saturn moving into Aries at the end of May, and Uranus changing signs into Gemini in July. Neptune changing into Aries in late March, and Pluto's just gone into Aquarius. So, I mean, there's no shortage of major transits in the year ahead to be unpacking together month by month. So I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I can't wait.
And on that note, how was the month of December? I mean, as we're recording this, we're not quite finished with it. We're recording it just prior to the end of the year. Around the holidays, it's a little tricky. We don't get to go through usually the full month. We record a little bit more in advance, but yeah, how has December been so far? Jupiter, Saturn square, some of the other big transits of the month.
You go first, Alexandra.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying this Mars retrograde. I don't always there, even Mars at its best is like a little chaos and is a mixed bag, but I have been really enjoying this, and especially I just blinked and I looked at my calendar for January, and I have so much good, amazing stuff that's coming up that are old things that I'm revisiting that's finally the right time for. So I feel relieved that this is one of those Mars retrogrades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's maybe a fresh perspective on Mars retrograde, because I don't know if we're all enjoying it, Alexandra.
Mars is so personal. It's truly
Yes.
with in my client practice, no planet creates a greater range of experience than Mars, and it's not even close. Like for some people, Mars is completely catastrophic, and for some, it is totally benevolent.
Well, I love how you created that worksheet for folks too. I mean, there's a plug for your worksheet too. Go find it, because I think it's so helpful to look back. I mean, Adam, you talk about this, right? And tracking the transits and journaling to understand how it's affecting each of the cycles in your life. And, personally, I'm not in the most comfortable of places with Mars retrograding in my first house.
Yeah.
I have been really learning and reflecting on the fact that, like, I need rest and I need space to thrive. And putting yourself first can be so much harder said than done. I mean that, and I changed my hair, so that's something spicy.
Right. Yeah, the Mars has been in my fourth house, and in Leo, I have had so much inner work that I've been doing especially with respect to my grandfather. It just feels like it's in the house of the fourth, often associated with the father. And I was thinking, oh, maybe some stuff with my dad will come up or something like that. But no, so many memories and dreams and really interesting parallels I've been observing in where I'm at in my life right now in certain respects, and elements of my grandfather's life. And I'm just like, wow, was not expecting that. I wasn't very close with my grandfather. I loved him. I knew him, but it wasn't like I had a super tight bond with him. So it's been really interesting to see that come up with Mars retrograde in Leo.
Oh, very cool. I mean, we had so much Sag stuff too this month, and I have a Sag stellium. And so as the planets went through, and I mean, currently we've got Sun on my Saturn Uranus. And so it's, and that's in my fifth house. So it's been like a lot of how am I putting my creativity out in the world, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, just so many clients, because of the way that the Saturn-Jupiter square is progressing. We talked last month about how that mutable T-square / Grand Cross, depending on your chart, was really targeting Sagittarians this summer. Now it's sort of targeting Virgos. And I just have so many clients who are like feeling so stuck, like hopelessly stuck in certain places of their life. And that is part of what I'm so excited about in 2025, is like a picnic basket just shaking out, a blanket. I guess not a basket, but it's like pulling the tablecloth out from under a table with all these dishes on it. I'm like, things are just going to change. That stuckness really, I think, is going to dissipate. So that's something I'm looking forward to with the progression of this square.
It'll be like one of those magic tricks where they can pull it out and nothing moves.
Right. Right.
We hope.
No, we want things to move. I think we want things to move. Like,
I think a lot of people want the entire table just out of just move it out, the trash dumpster.
I'm sitting on the floor, guys. Like, let's. And I shared about that too on social media, just under kind of the Sun square Neptune, that it really feels like things are changing, but we don't we can't exactly put our fingers on yet just how it's happening. And I think that's because, you know, it's the time of the turn of the year as well. And like you mentioned, Alexandra, the Jupiter squares Saturn. So yeah, interesting time.
It's also like in my experience looking back at the Jupiter Saturn hard aspects, their conjunction squares and oppositions, it's just hard to grasp the kind of change that you're going through when those two planets are together, because it's so thorough, the way that your worldview can change and various structures and systems and perceptions can start to shift because of life experiences. And when you're in the thick of it, it's just hard to see it.
I've been recommending your video with the journal prompts to everybody. It was just such a helpful take. And it's really complicated to tease out, especially in real time. It's so big.
Yeah. Well, Alexander went through our grabbed stories this month. We have one of our staff sort of collects all of the stories that were submitted through the grabbed series on the website. If you don't know about that, by the way, you can always share a story with us about any of the transits of the month that we cover on the channel. And you can use the hashtag grabbed and just tell us your story in the comments section. Just don't share anything you don't mind us sharing again in an episode like this or a storytelling episode, or you can email your story grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. But Alexandra collected some this month that she's going to read for us that you thought were good illustrations of some of the astrology from December. Do you want to share those with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so starting out strong with a Mercury retrograde. Mercury rules my third house. The day after Mercury went retrograde, I went to Les Schwab to get new winter tires put on my car. They put on the tires, but they looked really old and dusty. So I asked them, are these really new? And the tire guy reassured me they were brand new. So I went home, I Googled some things, and I learned that the manufacturing date is actually printed on the tire. Turns out my tires are almost 4 years old, which is practically halfway through their expected lifespan. So I called and complained. They admitted that they sold me old tires, and I'm going back on Saturday to get some real new tires.
Wow. I mean, good for getting smart and looking it up. Like, what? Don't get taken advantage of.
I love that. Yeah, like Mercury retrograde and Sag, the truth will come out. I will find the truth.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Another Mercury retrograde. Someone put in this brief story, but essentially this Mercury-Jupiter opposition with Mercury retrograde and Jupiter retrograde squaring this person's natal Mercury-Jupiter opposition across the 3rd and the 9th. And they actually got undergrad research funding for the first time after applying many times. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like a process and you've done it multiple times and then it comes up under a transit like that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And see, Mercury retrograde is not all bad, guys. These are great examples.
That's right.
Totally.
Sometimes you just have to redo things until you get it right.
Yeah. This one is a classic Mars. It's a classic retrograde story. Mars is stationing today, about to go retrograde. This morning, I had a very real dream that I woke up from, seriously considering texting my ex, one whose relationship was 4 years of toxic nonsense. I even went to grab my phone and look for his number, and they say I slowly woke up in my logical mind, and what I read was all of Adam's messaging about thinking twice before I do something crazy in a retrograde kicked in, and they promptly kiboshed that idea and decided not to do it, which is
that's funny.
We love.
Smart.
It's very smart.
Yeah, I mean, like we at the beginning of the retrograde, we started thinking about getting a dog, and I was like, let's wait until Mercury stations direct, and we waited all the way until Mercury station direct, and then I talked to several breeders, then we went and saw the puppies and everything. I was like, oh, okay, this feels much, but I just feel like in the midst of a retrograde, why not take your time?
Yeah.
If you can. Not every situation is like that, but
you know, Adam, I saw that and I thought getting a cane corso as a family guard dog is so Mars and Cancer coded.
I know, right?
I love that.
So good.
The funny thing is that I'm pretty sure that the date that the puppies are due and then how long they stay with the mom, it's like 8 to 12 weeks or something like that.
So it'll station direct first, huh?
It'll be stationing direct, and it might even be back into Leo around where we saw the dogs too. which
Nice.
also to me, like Mars retrograde in Leo, that I don't know, somehow that makes sense too. They're very regal, like guard dogs. But anyway, and they're very sweet too. They're not like predatory. Like people think all the worst things about mastiffs.
Of course,
just
of course.
the biggest sweeties in the world.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. I'm such a huge dog person.
Yeah, me too.
So this one, Mars opposite Venus, I love. Partial to art myself. So my partner, who I've been having a lot of tension with recently, came home in the mood for arguing. So in order to process my feelings, I went to my canvas and I started painting it out as a meditation. Typically, I do abstract work with rounded edges, but recently I tried out a style of sharp edges and it looks really cool to me. So last night, as Mars was opposite Venus, getting into its swing, I had the idea to combine my round and sharp styles into one painting. I really love it. And as I worked on smoothing out the edges here, straightening out edges there, coloring it in a happy palette of colors that went well with the whole, and placing a boundary edge of black around all of it, it felt like I was really working something out in my relationship and in my Mars-Venus at the same time.
Nice. Love that.
So cool.
Yeah, that's kind of sweet, huh?
Well, I just love the description too. You know, I think it's really hard to describe art, but that description plus your beautiful narration really painted it.
Oh my gosh, that Venus-Mars opposition was nuts. It was right around my midheaven and my IC, and I had a wave of very aggressive emails, and you know, I just, it's funny because like the I'd say 90% of the people who comment on this channel or on my Instagram or whatever are just like the world's biggest sweethearts. But under certain transits, the mean ones like come out of the woodworks and just start sending the worst shitty emails and comments and whatever. And I was like, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news when Mars turned retrograde too, and then Venus comes right in and was like all these emails demanding that I have a public opinion about all this stuff. I was like, I'm just gonna stay in my lane. I'm an astrologer. You can turn on the news and hear people's opinions about those things. For sure, they'll have opinions about it. So just go there.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was my Venus-Mars experience. It was right on my midheaven though. So it made sense that it was like, you should say something publicly. And I was like, I'll say something publicly. No.
You said it in the nicest way possible, Adam.
I tried.
You know, we were bound to get a little bit of tension. I mean, just in the aspect, but with Venus conjoining Pluto right before that, and then the full moon kind of bookending. Yeah. I can see.
Well, you know what? I was relieved though that it showed up there and not in like my marriage. Because you know, Venus opposite Mars had me like, oh gosh, are Ashley and I going to get in a fight or something? Because Mars Venus tense aspects are like a Venus Pluto dynamic. You know, I've had them in the past where it's like there's some kind of, you know, there's like a showdown where we have a different idea about something, and it's like a summit has to be held, or you know, and it's like, oh, let's not do one of those. But it wasn't. It was like everything. It was funny because the only thing that came up was Ashley was listening to a podcast that she shared with me. And of course, I had to remind her the transit because she doesn't pay attention to them as much as I do. But it was a podcast about a woman who had gotten out of an abusive, toxic relationship to a cult leader. And it was a fascinating podcast. And it was like she was like listening to it and showing it to me as Mars was opposite Venus. And I was like, oh, look at that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's so interesting.
Yeah, she was like, it was like you know, someone who had been in one of those like super deep South evangelical Christian communities or something. Mm-hmm. I think it was on one of the, maybe it was We Can Do Hard Things. I don't remember. It's one of her podcasts. So we ended up listening to it together. It was really fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, along those lines, I think the last grab I have is Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. This person says, hey, just wanted to share my Venus, Pluto, and Aquarius story. This transit is happening in my 6th house, conjunct my natal Uranus, squaring in 9th house Venus. I just finished my pistol permit class. I never thought of myself as someone who would own or use firearms, but I've been really feeling called to do it as a form of self-defense. This experience has me feeling like a fish out of water, pun intended, because I'm a Pisces sun, but I'm also going through it with my partner who has way more experience here than I do. And I'm really glad to have someone to lean on for support while I learn how to handle this new Pluto-esque tool.
And which transit was that again?
Yeah, Venus-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius.
Oh my gosh, right? Wow, that's that's totally on target right there.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the pun.
No
On
pun
target.
intended. It wasn't even intentional. I'm just that funny.
It's natural.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you everybody for sharing your stories with us and for making every month really memorable with some of these stories. They really do help. So if you ever have one that you'd like to share with us and be featured on the show on one of our episodes, use the hashtag grabbed, or email us grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. We use that word because one of the names for the planets were grahas in Indian astrology, which means grabber, or to be grabbed or grasped or seized, as in the gods have a way of seizing us. And our work in astrology is to be conscious of those times when that happens so that we can laugh, learn, live, and reflect with the planets rather than being just kind of unconsciously puppeteered, which does happen when we're not like trying to stay conscious. And that's really what this is all about. So on that note, let's turn our attention to the astrology of January. We have a bunch of good transits to talk about this month. And we're going to start with, I'm going to put the real-time clock up. And we're going to start here on January 1st. The first little part of this month, the 2nd through the 6th, we have called Mars retrograde stress test. This is Alexandra's smashing title. I love it. And it really, the reason that we're calling it this is because in these first 6 days of the month, Mars will oppose Pluto in its retrograde. That happens on January 2nd. And then by the 6th, Mars will retrograde back into Cancer, the sign of its fall, where we experience Mars earlier in the autumn if you're in the northern hemisphere, the spring if you're in the southern hemisphere. We already experienced Mars direct through Cancer. Now it's retrograding back into Cancer, where it's going to stay for quite some time. So this early part of the month, a big piece of this early part is all about Mars. Another thing that happens during this little period of time we're going to mention during this portion of the show is Venus's entrance into Pisces, where she is exalted. That's going to help a little bit because having a really well-dignified Venus can bring maybe a little bit of ease or flow into a time that is definitely very Marsy. So what do we want to say about these couple of transits? I'm going to let you guys lead off here. Maybe starting with Mars opposite Pluto.
Yeah, I'm happy to lead us off. You know, Mars opposite Pluto to me, in this moment, you know, think about it. We just ended the month with the new moon in Capricorn. This was like a peak end, right? Where we know the work that's in front of us. And to me, this asks, what are we ready to sacrifice? I mean, powerful New Year's resolutions are dripping all over this transit. Obviously, there's a lot of power behind Mars-Pluto. When we talked about Mars-Pluto the first time around, a couple months ago, you know, we talked a lot about the savagery, the cathartic qualities, the primal and ruthless nature, right? And there is still all of that, right? That's why it's a stress test. But the difference with this one is that across the Leo-Aquarius axis, we're looking a lot more at the dichotomy of the self versus collective and, you know, society. Oh, should we go society? I've always wanted to say that.
Adam, do you care to comment on society? Just kidding.
No, actually, I think, Adam, you should comment because I need to know where did the whole society outrage come from? Is that from your show, or is it from like like, does it reference something?
Yeah, no, it was I did it on my show because there's certain words that when you repeat them, 3 times a week when you're making horoscopes, eventually you just start hating yourself. So I'm just kidding. But so I'm like, God, I just, so it's like searching for another word. And then when I run back into it, it's kind of like, society. But actually it comes from a movie, which is called Into the Wild. And there's a character in the movie, a young man who's like against society and going out into the wild. And he meets up with Vince Vaughn in a bar in like Alaska or something.
Yeah.
And they're getting hammered together, and he's complaining about society, and they're high too. I think they smoked a joint, and then they're both just start slamming their fists on the table, going, "Society, man, society!" And it's one of my favorite funny moments in one of my favorite movies. And so occasionally, when I feel that word being said, and I'm like, yeah, society. I think of that movie. And it's funny because a lot of people, when I started doing it, a lot of people thought it was funny and didn't know the background of that movie. And then a lot of people were like, oh, I love that movie. So now it's just become a legend on the channel.
Oh my God. Thank you for telling this story, because I was one of those people like, where does this come from? I love it. Just to wrap up my little piece on society, I think that where we can see the gold in this transit, which is undoubtedly tough, right, is that I think Mars opposing Pluto here is us mustering the bravery, like the bravery that we need for a big action or a big change, whatever we've got cooking in our own lives. On the flip side, it could very well show us where we are not brave, where we are vulnerable. And so I guess that would probably lead us right into the Mars retrograding into Cancer, right? That vulnerability. But I'm curious to know what you guys have to say about Mars opposing Pluto this time
This
around.
is my daughter, Summer.
Hi, Summer.
Hey, Summer.
Just a second, Summer. Hold on.
Hey, friends.
We got a cameo.
I guess someone's at the door, and Summer's homesick from school today. So I'm going to go get the door. You guys keep going on Mars-Pluto. I'll be right back.
I love it.
Okay.
We'll jam.
Definitely.
Okay, but I'm also really excited that we got a Summer cameo. I feel like that's a rare moment.
No, it's so sweet. I actually think there's something that's actually kind of really tied into some of my larger thoughts about Pluto and Aquarius and what it means to have a living generation undergoing a Pluto opposition, like the Pluto and Leo generation. I think the way that we think about what we want from people like Adam, public figures, and, all other sorts of public figures, but has just been changing so dramatically. And we're seeing it play out in real time. Lots I could say about that. I don't feel like it, but this transit really has me thinking. I talked last time about like the ambition and the like Icarus quality of Mars and Leo, and the yearning and the fighting and the leadership and the ambition and the cost of that ambition. And so that myth of Icarus really comes up for me around this. But I think when you boil it down to its parts, for me, a lot of this Mars-Pluto looks like it's really about the dynamic and the social cost of visibility, or kind of invisibility. Like I'm thinking about statues of formerly esteemed people being torn down by those angry crowds. Like that's kind of where I'm going with that. Or something that was coming up to me was this image of the crowd crush, which is such a misunderstood phenomenon, but it's essentially when the undulation and the movement of a crowd becomes such that I think people think about that as like trampling. But what the effect is actually is that the choreography of that motion compresses individuals so tight that you struggle to breathe. You can't take up your own individual space anymore. And you don't have that space in the motion of the crowd. So, that's like a dark thing. And I do think in a mundane way, this transit is a little mean. Natally, not so much. But I just think like there's some connotations about the cost of our ambitions and our individuality, and the ways in which we are praised for that, or also kind of like whack-a-mole bonked back down into the crowd for standing out.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Sorry about that. We had I guess there was someone, it was a delivery person here, and my daughter wisely is, don't answer the door if someone come
So
get
smart.
me. So really smart of her. So she came and got me, and I had to sign for something.
Hopefully it was a holiday gift. Yeah.
And afterwards, it was cute. She goes, "I'm really sorry to have interrupted your recording, Daddy." And I said, "It's okay. It's no big deal. Thank you for coming and getting me."
Makes it more special.
I know. Well, so one of the things that comes up for me is also the way in which, when I think about Mars in Leo, I think about what kinds of heroes and villains we lionize. Like, it's not surprising to me that under a Mars retrograde, we also had Wicked come out, to the theaters, obviously.
Yeah.
There's this way in which we look at anti-heroes and villains who might be heroes who might be villains, and there's some reversal of who and what we consider to be strong or powerful. And there's also this really, the revenge can sink its claws into our psyche. We can celebrate things that are like mavericks and renegades and rebels, and then it can go too far. I think back also with the French and American revolutions and the what was his name? Was it Robespierre? I can't remember his name, but it was the guy who was like, a hero, and then he became a tyrant. There's that that potential for things that are heroic to become villainous, and things that are villainous to be heroic, and conversations and debates about those things that I've already noticed happening, and the way we can get seized also into looking at people as categories rather than individuals too. That's a big one where the crowd can squash the nature of the individual because there's something that we identify about a person collectively. Athletes, for example, that are vilified because they belong to a team that's won a lot or something.
It's the shut up and dribble. Yeah,
exactly. So all of those things are really interesting. I also look at Mars opposite Pluto as a point of transformation, really, where something that you're frustrated by can become the motivation to make a change. And also something that you're frustrated by, suddenly you realize, okay, for example, if you're in the process of training and you find the training very grueling and difficult and taxing, and then all of a sudden you hit a breakthrough and you go, oh my God, it's working. Like, something like that too comes to my mind. I know that during the first opposition between these two, I implemented the new plan I was telling you guys about a couple months ago, with respect to how I train. I'm fully anticipating that some of my frustrations, which are really psychological, not physical, with the plan, are probably going to hit another edge under this one. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I now know, because I've tracked out the cycle, I have to stick with this. This is part of a process. Let my frustration be a positive part of that process that I work with and grapple with and work through, rather than overreact to, or get impulsive around.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for you, Adam. It like station before it hits your chart ruler. So it's almost like go back, pick up stuff, come back through. It's doing the same for me. I have like some planets in Leo. So it's like, I don't get that Mars action back until kind of like April. And I think what you're talking about Mavericks and oh gosh, this transit is setting us up for Saturn and Aries. It's setting the mood. It really is.
Yeah, good point. And it's interesting because we have in March, we're going to have the Venus retrograde in Aries, the Mercury retrograde in Aries. We'll have a solar eclipse in Aries and Neptune entering Aries, all in 1 month.
We're going to have a 3-hour show.
Yeah, I mean, and what's crazy about that is like, just kind of jumping forward here a little bit. If you look at that, well, by the beginning of April, we're then coming into the orb of Mars hitting Pluto again. I mean, it's starting to get into, by early April, it's like Mars is about to get into Leo again. So that you're right, they are connected. I think you're totally spot on there.
So interesting. Can I draw one more parallel as we're talking about Mars retrograde, maverick, hero, or villain? I mean, what about I can't pronounce his last name, Luigi, the person who shot the United Healthcare CEO? Like, talk about this villain who is being called a hero in some circles. I think it's so interesting that we're talking about this now, when in the time we're in right now, that basically just occurred, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That was the one. Well, Venus was opposite Mars across my midheaven, that I was getting so many angry emails being like, why aren't you saying something about the astrology of this young man who did this thing? And I was like, I'm not going to comment. I'm just like, not that I can't see the astrology around it, but I can see the astrology around it in many different reactions that people are having. And I'm more interested in that than I am in presenting my own opinion, you know?
The crowd crush.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
And that's the thing, is that, like, if you look at it from the standpoint of the crowd crush, you have a person who is murdered, who's being like, the celebration of that murder has to do with the category that the person belonged to, healthcare insurance, right? And that's understandable. It's understandable that people have a lot of anger and rage toward insurance companies, right? And yet there's something very dehumanizing about the way that he's put into a category, not seen as a person who's murdered, right? So you can look at it in many different directions, is the point, from the standpoint of the archetypes. And also, choosing to lionize a renegade is very Mars retrograde, right? And also maybe being seduced by a revenge narrative and sympathizing with a villain who represents something of our own anger toward institutions that we feel have suppressed and harmed. All of it. So it was just like, wow, the astrology couldn't be any more spot on with what's happening. But I see it not so much from the standpoint of what ought to happen or what is the right or wrong reaction to the situation, and more that every different way that I've seen people reacting and responding is a reflection of the jewel of the archetypal combination. It's just, it's right there, you know, and it's all very human to have all these different reactions.
Facts.
Yeah, it felt very tied into the Saturn-Jupiter square, and how the conversations we had 4 years ago are quite different. The people whose names are being painted and whose portraits are being painted in graffiti murals, like, how much has changed in those 4 years. I don't think I want to step in it any more than that.
No, I mean, it's a great point. And again, like, what I think that for me as an astrologer who's really here to facilitate a meaningful connection to a sacred cosmos is not so much to tell people how to think, or what is the moral or immoral way to think, or what is the pure or impure way to think or feel or respond. It's more to say, notice the archetypal, notice that we're so easily just right in the midst of the archetype. And we think sometimes that we're not, you know what I mean? And it's just that recognition that can really give us more reflective space and allow us flexibility and compassion for people whose views or experiences of such events may be different from our own. And that's really what I'm mostly interested in.
This kind of like dovetails nicely, just to touch on Mars when it goes into Cancer, which we haven't kind of said explicitly, but once Mars moves into Cancer, we're really going to have to start tracking the moon. And if you are interested in tracking astrology daily, but you can't figure out a good time to do it, I feel like this is the perfect time to do it. It's like 6-ish weeks from January 6th through February 23rd. Everything Mars does will be kind of governed by the moon and reflected by the moon. Adam, you talk about the moon as a weaver. Amazing analogy, and we see that a few times later in the month. But and it also teaches us something interesting about dignity, because there are times when, say, Mars and the moon have mutual reception, but there's a real question of, like, does this make it nicer? Question mark, because the core of dignity is that it actually just empowers each planet to sort of like accomplish their agenda more seamlessly. Does that make it nicer, or does that make it more difficult? It's going to be a mixed bag natally, I think, for people. And I do think there's an optimism to it, though, that I'm seeing. I couldn't see it when we talked about it first, when Mars was first in Cancer, but for a lot of clients and people I've talked to, there's this like emergent sense of ferocity and desperation and excavation, like fingers in the dirt, digging, trying for like just to find the thing that they are wanting. For some clients, it's to feel alive this way or to feel invigorated this way or a sense of self or empowerment. But there's like a real feral quality to this Mars retrograde that I think actually is quite optimistic after all.
Whitney, you want to say anything?
Well, I just love when Alexandra talks about optimism. I'm like, what? Yeah. No, I think what I'm thinking about with Mars retrograding back into Cancer is the wounds that have been opened. How are we healing them? So I'm right there with you on the optimistic side of it. And I think anytime we experience something again for the first time, we've learned the first time around, right? So we're taking our lessons and we're working through them. It's not to say it might not be uncomfortable, right? I think when Mars dials back the heat and we turn up the emotion and the sensitivity, it's bound to get a little bit uncomfortable, right? But so is all of our work.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know that one of the things that I suspect will come back will be a strong connection to things that are familial and ancestral, domestic, that sensitive, sweet home space of Cancer. I saw a concentration of clients and students, obviously, in our Roots and Spheres monthly moon circle, which, shameless plug, by the way, if you want to track the moon cycles, come join us for the moon circle. Starts in January 2nd. You can get that through the Kickstarter as well. A number of women dealing with, issues with their menstrual cycles or just that kind of Cancerian space. Had a few clients that were in the process of mastectomy or of hormone therapy or someone who's transitioning, right? So just that just kind of delicate space, right? Where rhythms in the body, which are so lunar. I mean, one of the reasons that the moon is connected to the body in ancient astrology is because the body is seen as a kind of ecological system that moves in rhythms and patterns and cycles. And the moon was the planet most closely related to the ebbs and flows of fortune and life and biological embodied life. And we think of the sign of Cancer. It's called the gateway of mankind, and the sign through which the sun starts to descend in its yearly path down toward the southern horizon. And that was seen as a descent of spirit coming down into matter. And so the embodiment of spirit in the material world was considered lunar, which is why the moon ruled over the realm of the material. And matter and mater and mother all share the same roots etymologically. And so we have a connection with this sign and a very vulnerable place, which is the ground of our body, the ground of our biological existence. And for most of us, that's connected also to a feeling of safety, regulation, emotionally and physically, at homeness. And what I see as the benefit of this transit, along with Alexandra's optimism and Whitney's cautious advice, is that the promise of this is that if there needs to be some kind of adjustment to rhythms and regulations, emotionally, physically, environmentally, this is a transit that can create an awareness around that. And then the action that Mars brings to change. They'll change something so that you feel safer, I thought this was remarkable. So Mars was retrograde in Cancer, and there was a story that came into my awareness through someone who dealt with a situation of attempted burglary. And then immediately, one of the questions that they had was whether they should own a gun or whether they should have a guard dog or a guardian breed dog or whatever. And I just thought, that's so Mars and Cancer. That question would come up around my safety. And that's a pretty extreme example. I only heard of one, pretty extreme example like that during the Mars and Cancer period. But the point is just that an opportunity to assess what it means to feel safe, comfortable, rhythmic, healthy, connected, and by extension, how some of those same questions may come up within a broader family constellation or community or village constellation. Cancer kind of connects us to village life, family life as well. So I think the benefit would be, here's what needs to change so that you can feel safer, happier, smoother, more rhythmic. But as to what Whitney was saying too, like the fact that Mars in Cancer can kind of, it's like the waters are troubled a little bit. And that part, it might be part of how we become aware of what needs to change. So I see those as some of like the light and dark side of the transit, but it's certainly like once it's back into Cancer, it's going to be a distinctly different mood from Leo.
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the beginning, but no planet creates a wider range of experiences in like the lives of my clients. It's just, if you're interested in that, I would recommend going back and looking at previous Mars retrogrades. Obviously, as Whitney mentioned, I put out a worksheet. It tracks all the Mars retrogrades through 1960. It's free and it's just a Google Doc. But even if you just do it on your own and you like look into the previous ones, you can really start to get a sense of some patterns and some stuff emerging. So it might give you a heads up, because this is one of those transits that just dramatically impacts people very differently. For some people, catastrophic. For some people, really good, and everywhere in between.
Yeah, it is true that like for some people, Mars is going to initiate, incentivize, motivate, like it really moves shit. And for many people that will be experienced as like I still remember, like I told you guys last time we were talking about this, you know, the Mars retrograde that was in Gemini, which happens to be my home Mars sign, was what catalyzed a huge shift in my life with respect to my health journey, my, weightlifting regimen, like everything. That was one of the most positive shifts in my life. That was a Mars retrograde. So, just goes to what you're saying. And also like watch the moon. I think that's the great piece of advice, is that this retrograde is going to be a little different every day, depending on what the moon is doing. So big lunar days become important. On that note, should we transition into full moon energies?
Totally.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we're going to go to the full moon in Cancer on the 13th, but two quick transits to talk about on the 12th and 13th, right before the full moon. We have two interesting trines. The first is going to be Mars trining Neptune. Now, we had this before, right? Earlier, I think it was, what was it, September, October? But this transit connecting Mars and Neptune can be, in my experience, sort of heroic, and it can be emotionally charismatic. It's, a trine is generally very supportive. A Mars retrograde trining Neptune could be the motivation to revisit something or to look at something that you've been avoiding, and the emotional wherewithal to say, you know what, I can do this. I can look at this. I can explore something or go into something that's been overwhelming for me in the past and maybe find some way of dealing with it. It might also be just an outpouring or flowing of emotional energy that's healing and somehow supportive and motivating. Those are some of the positive things that I think about with this one. You guys want to add a few more onto this transit?
100%. I'm getting sacrifice with this one. It feels to me like a sacrifice for spirit. And what came up when I thought about what happens when Neptune trines Mars was actually Joan of Arc's vision from God, right? And that was an act to save her own country. And I see that kind of coming up again later in the month, but I'll hold the drama there. I just wanted to add that beyond the kind of typical like slicing through the fog or burning off the fog, right? I think there's even something more profound here. And we talk about spirit when we talk about Neptune, right? And I've experienced that myself under Neptune transits, really poignant downloads. And I think we have potential here with this helpful trine, like you mentioned, in Pisces and Cancer water signs, right? So that's what I have to add. Alexandra, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm similarly sort of feeling optimistic about this one. I love that the moon is trining Venus well on this day. And I think a little bit about Mars's functionality of like cutting through, and one of Neptune's functionalities of like dissolving. And so this feels like maybe a surging, emerging sense of optimism and clarity that's sort of buffeted by that moon Venus aspect, Venus Saturn, which kind of perfects later, applying too. So it's kind of like the fog and the water, and it's like, oh, seeing the thing. It was reminding me of like scenes in a video game or a movie where you're like scuba diving and it's like all obscured, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there it is, that's the thing I need, and you kind of can head that way.
Yeah. It's not a shark, it's a treasure chest.
Yes, let's hope so. The other one I got was like a ship at sea, right? And the sirens call. So don't get too entranced by the sirens call.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah.
To their death.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot of charisma and a kind of big emotional energy around the full moon because of that Mars trine Neptune. The full moon comes through on the 13th, on the same day that the sun is trine to Uranus. So we get Mars trine Neptune on the 12th, sun trine Uranus on the 13th, with the full moon in Cancer on the 13th, also sextiling Uranus, and basically in applying conjunction with that Mars Neptune dynamic, which is still just separating. When I look at that together, I go, okay, this is a very dynamic full moon that has this kind of, that kind of Uranian sense of, I'm going to do things differently, or I'm going to seize an opportunity to kind of choose a radically different path or an alternative, or kind of a little revolutionary energy. And then it's fueled by the kind of idealism and emotional vigor and charisma of the full moon and the Mars Neptune dynamic. So it's a very emotionally potent, and I just can't help but wonder if this isn't sort of like one of the bigger kind of, what do you call it, like an accent or highlight over the Mars retrograde period itself. It's like, this is a big moment for Mars's retrograde.
Yeah, Mars moon is also trining Neptune, and Neptune is sextiling the sun. So it's like this bow tie of support that's going on. And on this day, well, really on the 12th of January, Mars will be the closest to Earth it ever gets in its cycle. It will be just about half the distance it normally is, which is so close. So first of all, definitely go outside. I use this awesome app called Skyview Light. It's called Skyview Light. It's free. You just go outside and it does it augmented reality, so you can see what stars you're looking at. It's amazing. Highly recommend. This is one of those opportunities, I think, where the moon is like being the weaver. The luminaries are sort of like at odds with Mars, but they're both in these supportive aspects. And Whitney was talking about this protective quality of water. That's totally what I was thinking of, this being a huge moment in the retrograde, maybe even like the energetic peak, because that's how we normally think of a full moon. Some people do. But this was reminding me of in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, when Ichabod Crane is like, in his mind, he's like, if I can just go across that bridge, go across the stream, the headless horseman can't cross the running water. And that's sort of like an adage about spirits, like they can't cross running water. And so I was thinking about that protective nature of water, or like water that's a moat. Like we talk about Lord of the Rings a lot on this program. So, thinking about the Battle of Helm's Deep, which in the books, like there was a moat and a dike. And so it's like they were treated back within the safety of those water features that were going to give them safety. And so I was really feeling about that safety feeling of water, or the questions anyway, not always safety, but maybe questioning and feeling unsafe and trying to find and locate your protection.
Yeah, love that. It feels like a pretty auspicious time. Like there's a lot of poignancy, and whenever there's poignancy, I don't think of everything being totally easy. Mars retrograde, a full moon is a very big, energetic, kind of vigorous moment, and Mars retrograde is in the mix of it. But I do feel like it's an effective moment. It's it's supported. And then a little extra testimony to that effect. You look at the next day, January 14th, and the benefics are coming together in a square. Whenever the benefics are together in squares or oppositions, it's not nearly as challenging as just about any other type of aspect. Any time the benefics connect, there's usually some good vibes. So I like that Venus and Jupiter are connecting right after the full moon. That feels good. That feels like some things are conspiring on both practical levels and sort of broader cosmic levels to affirm, confirm, support. So I love that transit. And then this goes to what we were just saying as well, which is it's still a very dynamic time, because then we have on the 15th, right after the full moon, of course, then we have the sun opposite Mars. And let me just push this forward one day. Here we go. So January 15th, it's right around here. So this is the 15th. It's on the 15th. I'm just a few hours short, but there it is. The sun opposing Mars. One of the ways that I think about the opposition, which is always happening right during the middle of, Mars's retrograde, is that this is an opportunity for clear differentiations to be made. And also, when there are clear differentiations, sometimes that can mean separation of things that have been joined, but maybe we understand that they need to be separated or differentiated somehow. But then the other thing that's there is sometimes things that we have been separated or that we've been polarized by, when you can see them really clearly, sometimes there's a unique opportunity for synthesis. I find that's the case in almost all oppositions, that oppositions can clearly distinguish and differentiate, which sometimes we need. Like if my identity is if I'm overly identified with something in my life, like my job, it helps to get some space so that I go, I am not my job. I have a job, And similarly, oppositions like this can create a clear sense of what is mine, what is not mine, what is me, what isn't me, or what my values are and what they aren't. And that may create some divisions or separations, and things can get amplified around that. But then on the other hand, wherever a clear understanding of oppositions exists, sometimes there will also exist an opportunity for synthesis, mediation, resolution, because opposites have a secret way in which they can lead to union or conjunction. The two are a part of each other. So I think of this as a really important moment within the overall arc of the Mars retrograde story. I love that it's coming around all these full moon energies that feature trines, that feature connections between the benefics. It feels like things are conspiring for a healthy moment of clear distinction, differentiation, and that even if it's difficult, will be the right thing somehow. But those are just some of my impressions. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you both have said throughout this entire little full moon portion. These several transits are absolutely all weaved together, and I think we're going to feel them kind of in that jumble, right? And it's just as you said, this moment feels like a helpful reorientation, and reflection as well of how far we've come. And with that, we have this emotional grounding that supports our work. And, if we take it back to Joan of Arc and this vision from Spirit, right? This is where that vision integrates into our goal, specifically with the sun opposing Mars. And so I appreciate, Adam, that you talk about the constructiveness that can come even from a hard aspect like an opposition. And I think that's echoed with the Venus square to Jupiter too. Yes, it's a square, it's a hard aspect, but in fact, it is helping us get somewhere by bolstering this attitude and activity, right? So that's I'm excited about this, and I think that the month January gets better as it goes along, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, also the thing that comes to mind, like a cap sun opposite Mars in Cancer. The cap sun is like, there's one way up the mountain, and it's to climb, get your stick, and the Mars in Cancer might be like, there's another way up, and it's with compassion and love and carrying people on stretchers who can't walk. And, and I feel like the question of, Capricorn's way of thinking and doing things might be pitted against a more sensitive approach that is challenging Capricorn's way of thinking too. A kind of an argument between like a patriarch and a matriarch who are both good people. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you could imagine that you have the good version of whatever a patriarch looks like, the good version of whatever a matriarch looks like, and they're having a council dinner together discussing how to deal with a problematic person in the village. That conversation's interesting with this. If you look at it from that standpoint, I just feel like this could lead to a compromise of how the masculine and feminine qualities, which I really see, both signs are feminine, but Sun and Mars together have a kind of masculine quality. So I feel like you could look at the conversation as one that has to do with the yin and yang of a situation and how to bring those needs and dimensions of action together.
Gosh, I was just watching the movie Moana last night with my son, which I had never seen before. And it's about a young girl. I know.
So brilliant.
So good.
Yeah, and she wants to go out into the ocean. Like, that's that Mars in Cancer right there, being like, but I have this dream, I have these ambitions, I have these goals to go past the reef. And her dad's like, no, you're going to be the leader of this tribe someday, and you need to put your rock on top of the mountain. And somehow she ends up continually finding herself wanting to go out into the ocean. So that's spot on, Adam.
Well, and if you, the second one was pretty good. I like the first one better, but we did go and see that as a family after Thanksgiving, and the adventure continues. And like, I live with, like, I have some friends who are in animation, and I live with what feels to me at times like really cliched storytelling. Like, how many times are you going to have a main character in a Disney movie start off with one of their parents dead or something?
Right.
So many things like that. But I will say that there are some Disney movies that have been really well done. The storytelling I really love, and Moana is definitely one of them.
It's been really sweet because when I was young, my dad was very into art and culture. I am not, I joked last month about being the reference queen. No, my dad was the reference queen. Okay. But so when I was old enough, meaning 12, he was like, sit down, let's watch The Godfather. Like, I think the only Disney movie I ever watched was Old Yeller. That was his idea of a Disney movie. So part of this Mars retrograde for me has certainly been part of it has been carving out my identity as a mom and what that means and who I am now that I'm a mom, because I have a Cancer moon, and going back and watching these movies, and I've never seen any of them, not any of the classic ones, not any of the new ones. And I'm just crying every night with my son. Like, every night we sit down to watch this, I'm just crying new. And
yeah. Have you seen Mary Poppins yet?
I don't think I've ever seen it. No, I have so many classics. I need to go back.
Sincerely, the original Mary Poppins, the Mary Poppins Returns is good too, but the original Mary Poppins, that has to be one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. So good.
Yeah, let me know in the comments like what I need to do. I'm very new to this, and it's really healing my like inner child to be seeing him get excited about this stuff. It's actually so sweet.
Well, at some point, I feel like you probably have seen have you seen like the Miyazaki movies, like Spirited Away?
No.
And okay, all of the Miyazaki movies. One for a little one would be like Ponyo.
Okay.
Ponyo. It's about a little fish. It's kind of almost like a Little Mermaid story. It's really, all of Miyazaki's anime films are awesome for kids' imaginations. My Neighbor Totoro, that's like one of the best movies of all time.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'm taking
all right. Let's go on to Venus conjoined Saturn. Speaking of the Little Mermaid, this couldn't be like more of a classic. The classic Little Mermaid tale is a little dark.
It is.
By the way. But so Venus conjoins Saturn in the sign of the Fish on January 19th. And just a couple days after that, on the 21st, these are mid-month transits. I put that little graphic up just a second ago. Mid-month transits, 18th, Venus conjoins Saturn. 21st, Sun conjoins Pluto. Those are heavy hitters coming back to back within just a couple of days. Venus conjoins Saturn, while Venus is exalted in Pisces, I will say is not the worst thing in the world. There's a quality to the Venus-Saturn conjunction in Pisces where Venus is exalted, where there's like almost like a high romance quality, because you have to have just a little bit of the bitterness of Saturn. with the exalted romantic qualities of Venus to get to some of the most refined beauty senses of like beauty and art and poetry and music and sensuality. And so I think that I'm not super worried about this Venus-Saturn dynamic, although of course challenges in relationships or hitting a roadblock with a lover or, you know, like all the classic Venus-Saturn stuff could come up. But Venus exalted here to me feels like we could also be dealing with like high drama, but also like some high romance.
Okay, listen. So after Venus squares Jupiter, this is like Venus, she's getting to work, right? And so again, the period of integration, right? But look at this. We have Saturn and Venus, and we also have Neptune in Pisces, and Neptune is trining Mars. And so with all of this loosely configured, it definitely feels, you said the romantic qualities, Adam, and yeah, we've got some star-crossed lovers vibes happening under this configuration for sure.
Yeah, it was the I believe it was the original, not the original, the Baz Luhrmann version of Romeo and Juliet that was being filmed. Or it was being, I think it was either being made or it came out when Saturn was in Pisces. They were in production, or it actually came out when Saturn was in. I can't remember which. But anyway, I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, Avatar did too, and maybe Titanic. Like maybe I'm off on those things, but no, maybe I'm not. I'm thinking of this as like Venus and Saturn is like conjuring up like a beautiful ballet in Pisces in my head. Or like the imagery of a rose encased in ice, or like the oyster in a pearl situation. Like it's really bringing up these beautiful images. I think it's actually so sweet. And there's something about this that also is tying in the moon as the weaver, because the moon at the exact moment of this transit is in Virgo, opposite, but it's, you know, Virgo's ruled by Mercury. Mercury's in a trine to the moon. So it's kind of like there's just a really interesting moon weaving happening here as well. But I think the Venus Saturn, it's like corseting. It's just something like really beautiful and delicate but rigid about this that I think is really nice.
That's interesting, because the other Venus Saturn thing that comes to my mind in Pisces would be, you know, a celebrity that had the Venus Saturn conjunction in Pisces was Kurt Cobain. And it was in his 7th house of marriage. And of course, you know, heroin addiction came in through the marriage and played a role in his downfall and so forth. Then I think of that, and I think of a movie like Black Swan. Did you ever see that movie?
Oh yeah,
you mentioned ballet, right? And it's like where that level of perfection and idealism around grace, beauty, art had like this maniacal side where there's eating disorders and there's, you know, that movie was so, oh God, that was a hard one. Like, I'm not like saying that'll be as dark as that, but the potential, as you mentioned, the moon in Virgo, the moon will, as these two planets are separating, moon goes into Libra, where Saturn is exalted and Venus rules. So yeah, I feel like the classical form of music comes to mind, right? Where there's a structure and there's a rigidity, or the ice and the rose you mentioned. And there's some really interesting themes that come around, you know, like even Beauty and the Beast can be very Venus Saturn with respect to the, you know, like the claws, even the thorns on a rose. And I believe in Beauty and the Beast, in the Disney movie anyway, there was a rose that was like falling apart, and she had to, do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yep. Encased in glass, like your ice
glass thing. Yeah.
So
I think
interesting.
Something to know, and I did just look it up, and neither Titanic nor Avatar was released with Saturn and Pisces.
I couldn't remember.
Just ignore me. But
checking yourself.
Yeah, no, always. But this Venus Saturn thing, this dance between the two of them, is going to be going on for literally the entire month of April, because she turns retrograde in March as Saturn is direct. And so they kind of like just pass each other. Venus gets to 24 Pisces and Saturn at that point is at 25 Pisces. So they're dancing with one another in a really beautiful way all the way through until May, basically, when Saturn and Venus kind of both head out. So
if we track this forward just to show you what Alexandra's talking about.
Thank you.
They're going to come, Venus goes retrograde in March, and then in April comes into, at the end of March, comes back into Pisces, conjoins Saturn, stations, turns retrograde in basically a conjunction with Saturn, goes forward across Saturn again by the end of April, and then both go back into Aries. So, you know,
in May,
that's really beautiful.
It's a dance that starts right now. That's what
the ballet.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful dance. It's really beautiful to me. I think that those two are doing something sweet together that then, you know, gets weird because they're both not happy in Aries. But for now, it's really sweet.
Well, one of the things that I also think about is the fact that during this time, we're also getting, let me get my everything back up on the screen here. Okay, so one thing that's also taking place right after they conjoin, like, you know, here we go. I have it as the mean nodes by the end of January change signs into Virgo and Pisces. We now have a long period of time in which Venus is going to do her dance with the North Node in Pisces. And in March, one of the things that's really interesting that happens is we get this eclipse that comes through in Virgo. So the eclipse, while Venus is retrograde heading back to Pisces on March 13th, just a couple weeks before all of that happens, we also have an eclipse in the polar opposite sign of Virgo. One of the things that I would connect to this is that Venus represented daughters and young women within the context of a family. You could identify as Venus in a chart if it was necessary, a horary chart or something like that. Venus could represent a sister or a particular female friend or something like that. And I'm not saying it's limited at all to daughters or young women, but Virgo is quite literally the image of a young woman as a constellation, a young girl, sometimes with a bird on her shoulder or with angel wings in some of the constellational art. Venus-Saturn is a hard standard for any earthly human girl to live up to. And I would also wonder about one of the things that I've noticed about the polarity between Venus and Virgo will be about approximating heavenly or divine forms of Aphrodite while also living with earthly reality. I have a body, I'm limited, I'm mortal, I have I have beauty marks. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm an imperfect person that has to live with flaws, and that can be excruciating. And one of the tensions that we often explore when Venus is in Virgo will be the challenge to carry that sense of imperfection, and to live with it as a beautiful thing, not a bad thing. So I wonder about some of those tensions coming across with Venus-Saturn too, given that the nodes are shifting and we've got this past karma trying to resolve itself in the sign of Virgo at the same time.
Wow, Adam, I'm like having a physical reaction to what you just said about the perfection and the related to the full moon eclipse in Virgo. It just so happens that may have been a personal reading because that eclipse takes place on my moon.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, totally. Right.
It takes Whitney like right on it's literally at 23. And I think that's like your node.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah. I love that you know that off the top
Venus
of your head.
stations direct at 24 Pisces. So it's like truly having that conversation right there.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when the astrology hits like that. And I have like some of these transits are really like the Sun conjunct Pluto, for example, is happening as Pluto is going right onto my own south node of the moon. So some of these transits I'm looking at and going like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's coming. That'll be interesting. The 21st, the Sun conjoins Pluto. It's a small moment. Like these transits are pretty quick. But if you have anything in the early degrees of fixed signs and you're receiving a square, an opposition, a conjunction from Pluto in like early Aquarius, early degrees of fixed signs again, this will be a powerful moment within the life of that aspect that you're living with right now, for sure. I think of Sun-Pluto moments usually as moments in which there's a strong surge of motivation, a willingness to look at difficult things sometimes, a heroic willingness to let the unconscious show itself, or to like, I have found so frequently that some of my best moments as a dad where I can really look at my own shit and go, okay, I'm not going to pass that on to my kids. I'm going to change something about myself that could get a little bit better as a parent. I have found those under Sun-Pluto little transits in the sky, just like this, many times, where just some little tweak that needs to happen within my role as a dad, but there's so many other things that can come to mind with Sun-Pluto. What do you guys think about it?
Well, I really like that too, because the sun is archetypally fathers, right? It is also leaders and leadership. And we have to mention that in the US, this day is Inauguration Day. And so there's definitely something happening here, right? Especially, right. I think back to late July, right before the sun opposed Pluto, we had that Capricorn full moon, and that's when Biden stepped down. And so there's definitely some cyclical connection happening here for sure. And, I don't know if we want to go into that whole debate here and now, but I wanted to point out that, yes, while it is a quick transit, it feels really, really powerful from a power and leadership perspective.
Yeah, it tracks as a transition of power, right? And you can
Sun-Pluto. New regime, death and rebirth of a power structure. Could we not get more literal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think, Adam, to your point, natally, like if you have if you have stuff going on in Aquarius or in the fixed signs, like this moment is really going to tell you a lot about the Pluto's quest for you over the next number of years, 19 of them, or 18 by 2025. But I think this kind of, for me, connects back to the way you were talking about the Mars-Sun opposition. And that for me also felt like a unity even though it's an opposition, it's like a point of contact. And I just have this whole elaborate like metaphor that I will save everybody this tortured thing, but of them as like co-conspirators, right? Because all this stuff's moving into Aries, which is a place that is both solar and martial next year. And like, this is a moment where they're like looking at each other from across the room, like, you good? Like, are we doing the plan in that opposition? And they're like, yep, they wink, they give each other the secret signal. And the sun's like, okay, I'm going dark again. I got to go, finish the plan and whatever we're going to accomplish. It's a deeply personal thing for every person. But this really feels like, okay, I'm going in, I'm going to go do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's move into our late month transits next. The late month transits that we have are between the 23rd and the 26th, with a little bit of new moon energy at the very end of the month. On the 23rd, Mercury will oppose Mars. This is one of a couple of transits that happen right in a row. Venus will then trine Mars on the 25th. And then there's a curious little sextile between Venus and Uranus that Alexandra's going to talk with us about for sure. Let's start with Mercury opposite Mars on the 23rd. I think that in echoing the full moon energy, where the sun got into the opposition with Mars 2 days after the full moon on the 15th of January, now we see Mercury and Mars exchanging across the same axis. And it's almost as though we're revisiting a conversation that was taking place around the full moon. Maybe that Capricorn and Cancer patriarch matriarch meeting in the about what to do with the the problematic thing or person or whatever it is happening again. But also I would look at this as different modes or methods of communication and of action that are having some kind of there's either a confrontation or a butting of heads or a real difference in how people are thinking or communicating. And that might be something that's a little frustrating to deal with, or, it could be that, you're tempted to think that there's only one way of doing something, or that only one emotional response is the valid response. So I would just be careful about like extremes around this in thinking and emotions and communication. And then again, remembering that there's maybe an opportunity in every opposition for some melding of perspectives or some recognition of the other that is initially hard to do, but if you're able to do it, might bring something more constructive about.
I totally agree. I mean, the only thing I really have to say here is a small PSA. Just, be conscious of what you say and what you're putting out there in the world on this day. Make sure that it is true to you and, aligned with yourself, because I think there is, like you mentioned, Adam, a real chance for anger, outrage, sharp reactions, and you don't want to deal with those unless, you really believe in what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we think, oh, I'll do them a favor and give them the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd be careful of that around this transit.
Yeah. Totally. We also have, the moon as Weaver here, trining Mars from Scorpio, sextiling Mercury. So I think that's important. And something that just jumps out is that both Venus and Mars, again, are coming back exactly to these places in just a little bit, right? Yeah. Venus is going to retrograde, Mars is going to go direct. And so for me, seeing that symphony, like we're talking about it, this whole episode, we're like, well, this is going to kind of play out. This is a story that plays out. These are those moments for me as an astrologer and someone who's deeply spiritual, tracking astrology. Like, I'm like, these are those like little stories that you see emerge that feel like fate. It just feels like there's something going on. We're a part of it. You can see the machinations. You can see things moving on, playing out, coming back. And there's too many layers. Adam, I love your phrasing of like the beautiful mandala of the signs and the planets and the things that are going on. It's like they're touching in too many points. It's like a really beautiful machine. And I love seeing these moments where you can, for a minute, you see the machine at work and you're like, whoa. And then you go back into the mystery of being alive and in this place, which I think is so lunar, as you mentioned. But basically, like Venus is sextiling Uranus here. That sextile plays out the entire month of April as well, because Venus comes back in. So she's dancing with Uranus, she's dancing with Saturn, she's dancing with Mars. It's just such a beautiful and dynamic, like, series of movements that just feels like a ballroom dance that, I mean, I don't even know that I have a ton to say about it analysis wise. I'm just sort of, these are those moments where I really marvel about the complicated machinery that we get the privilege to sort of spend each month waxing on about.
Yeah. As much as that Mercury opposite Mars moment is sort of a little confrontational, and it could be like mental and verbal altercations. That's a very Mercury opposite Mars thing. Another thing that we can say about Mercury opposite Mars that was said in some of the ancient astrological delineations and texts was that the two put together are very scientific, very analytical, very executive in their thinking, or mathematical. The skill needed to do surgery is Mercury Mars, or to even baking or alchemy or use of knives in the kitchen. Like, there's so many things that require precision and exactness. And I wonder if something isn't being articulated that needs precision around this time. And that, when you're in a space where you need to be really accurate with something, isn't it nice to see Venus trining Mars, Venus sextiling Uranus, creating, instead of disruptions that are chaotic and could take an opposition where there's a razor's edge between doing something correctly and maybe cutting something, and providing a little grace, a little flow, a little support, a little ease. So I love this as like a pressure point, but one that's got these little Venus inflections around it that seem to provide a little smoothness.
Absolutely. I'll just add that this Venus-Mars-Uranus dynamic, in addition to Mercury-Mars, feels like a moment where we can nurture, and it's maybe nurturing our hurts that have come up at that time.
Yeah. It's completing something too, isn't it? As the dark moon is coming through, it's like, I think of, that's a good word, nurturance and devotion, and seeing something through. That comes to my mind too. Like, it's I sort of, like, if I had to describe one difference between me and my wife, it's that when it comes to bedtime, my wife will see it through. Because she's a nurturer, she's Cancer rising. I guess to a certain point when my kids come out and they're complaining that they have the world's worst disease, and it's the third disease on the list, after 30 minutes of saying all of our good nights, and Ashley is very patiently talking through everything. I mean, most of the time she loses her shit sometimes too, but she will see things through. And I think there's something very persistent about Mars in Cancer too. It's like, I'm going to see this through. There's like, if you think of Mars as the vows of a knight, this is the knight that's the mom. This is the knight that's the healer, or that will stick to their vow and see something through. And I like that as this moon cycle is coming through too, that Mars at the moment, like this moment while Venus is trining Mars in Cancer, the moon is in Sagittarius and it's kind of a dark moon. It feels like completing a quest or something like that.
Yeah.
Anything that sorry, did you want to add anything?
No, that one was for me because I finally got into a jewelry making class to make astrological talismans that I've been trying to get into for ages. So all of January, that's my Venus-Saturn Mars story.
Oh, that's amazing.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, and you can probably you'll have like the tools.
I'm going to be like with the crucible, like casting, carving. Totally. It's going to be amazing. I'm excited.
Yeah, you've got it. Mercury conjoins Pluto on the same day as the new moon on January 29th. So it's just a little transition between the 29th when Mercury conjoins Pluto and then the new moon comes through. Powerful Aquarian new moon to end the month. Anything you guys want to say about this new moon? Other than I feel like it's kind of really saying like, now Pluto in Aquarius.
Yeah, totally. Right. Both the luminaries, like Spotlight, like the dark theater. Totally. Yeah. Good one.
This is when here's my one very like silly prediction, because I don't make predictions. But if I had to guess when we might see things really reaching some kind of peak moment this year with respect to the drones, quote unquote, or orbs, or whatever the hell they are, all of the stuff that's been happening around aliens, UFOs, I wouldn't be surprised if it's within this Aquarian moon cycle as Mercury crosses Pluto and the messenger brings things from the invisible portion of the fixed sky, right? I mean, you're thinking of what is the underworld of the sky? It's the invisible realm that we can't see that somehow also connects us to sky. And I really feel like, I did a rewind episode recently where back in 2020, we were talking about Jupiter and Saturn coming together and Pluto eventually coming into Aquarius and looking at the phenomenon of aliens and UFOs. And I rewound that talk and I was like, it's crazy to say. I knew that probably this subject would come up, but not as like kind of vividly as it has. So I wouldn't be surprised if the whole conversation about aliens really ramps up quite a bit under this moon cycle.
Okay, I love this conversation. I love this new moon because I am an Aquarius. I'm excited. Selfishly, yes, this new moon is on my sun too. So I'm like, what is happening? We've got a lot here. It's funny though, because when we introed the show, we were talking about the change that we can all feel coming right now here at the end of the year. And what I really like about this Aquarius new moon is that this feels like that 1,000-foot view that can help us get perspective on the changes that have been happening in our lives. And, maybe it's the view from a spaceship when we, get the get the invasion, or I don't know.
They're peaceful visitors. They're here to teach us about a game that we've never played before. It's kind of like a Rubik's Cube, but different. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's be real. They're already here. No.
I'm not. I actually, it was like a big part of my Pluto webinar that I did where I was saying there's so many things that are alien or other to us that are right here that we don't even realize.
Deep in the sea, you mentioned.
Yeah, that lens of Saturn ruling all this from Pisces is like, don't forget, you could terrify yourself just looking into Mariana's Trench videos.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Like the Aliens of the Deep BBC Earth episode. It's like my favorite. And it's funny because obviously there's some of this surrounds the ocean and phenomenon in the ocean that is clearly the influence of Saturn in Pisces ruling the Aquarian planets, and also obviously Neptune there. So yeah, wow. It's the other thing that comes to my mind is the potential to romanticize the ideas that we're most attracted to under this moon cycle, because of the fact that the simultaneous there's trines to Jupiter, and then
Venus-Neptune.
Venus-Neptune, exactly. So I just feel like the ideas that we're getting captured by, even if they're good ones, we might be a little high on our own supply,
Yeah, this one's like pretty personal for me too. So I was thinking about my chart ruler Saturn is at 6 Aquarius. So I'm like, okay, just in my own thinking and prep, this February 2024 was like such a weird little preview period. I've talked to a lot of people who had Aquarius stuff. Like February was just it was like a window appeared and you could see into some other thing. And it was like, oh, if I chase, if I grind, if I do some stuff, maybe that could be my life. I've had a few other Aquarian friends who had a similar kind of experience. So I'm kind of connecting it back to the previous new moon that we had in Aquarius with Pluto there. That was the first. It was February 2024. And that one was at 20 Aquarius, although the date exactly is escaping me. Let me look. February 9. And so I'm kind of like tying it back to there. So if you have Aquarius parts, maybe revisit old journals.
Yeah, I mean that new moon I remember very distinctly, because Pluto was around that time also coming toward my south node, and we had this big change and transition in our staff, which set back the process of launching the affordable reading service by some time. We finally finished that in the fall. That was the catalyzer of a lot of change at Nightlight.
Same.
Yeah. So anyway, we have made it all the way through the month of January. This has been a really fun conversation, and I want to tell people how they can stay in touch with both of you. So if you want to get in touch with Whitney, you can find her work on astroarcana.com, where you can book a reading with her, and I highly recommend doing that to start the new year. You can get a good reading and take a look at the year ahead with her, or follow Whitney on astro.arcana.astrology on Instagram. And you'll find her sharing astrological content there as well. Alexandra, you can find her at 9livesastrology.com, and Instagram is going to be 9livesastrology. Also book a reading with her on her website at 9livesastrology.com. Good one to check out would be like let's look at the year ahead in January, something like that. I know that you have an event coming up, Alexandra. Do you want to tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, on the 12th and 13th of January, friends Sarah Posh and I were doing a live year ahead astrology workshop. So on Sunday, we're going to spend a few hours going through the transits. And then on Monday, we're going to do horoscopes for every rising sign. This is a crazy project. I'm very excited about it. And we decided to, instead of like talking about mundane stuff, like just there's enough people talking about that, we're really going to ground everything in natal, personal astrology, stuff you can use in your real life. So if you're interested in that, check out my Instagram. It's on there, links in all the usual places.
9 Lives Astrology is the Instagram where you could find that event, right, Alexandra?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. As you all know, as we close today, we are in the last days of our annual Kickstarter campaign. We still need the support of quite a few backers. So if you have already donated, a big thank you. If you haven't yet donated, I am going to remind you that the link is in the comments section of this video, the description of this video, and on the website, nightlightastrology.com. And after I log off here, you can stick around to hear about the rewards that are available when you support the channel, including all of the best discounts we offer for our online training programs, and some exclusive content. There's 8 hours worth of horoscopes for the year ahead, and the astrology of 2025. There's a calendar we have. You want to track the transits that we're looking at through the year. So I'll tell you about those next. All right, that's it for now. We'll see you guys again next month. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you about the different rewards that we offer when you donate and support our channel in the year ahead. So you'll find a link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video, in the comments section of this video, as well as on our website, nightlightastrology.com. If you head over there, you'll see at the top of the page there is a menu item that says Kickstarter 2025. You can click on that and be taken over to the Kickstarter campaign page. So once you're there, if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you're going to see different pledge levels and different gifts and sales that we run as a way of saying thank you for your support. So among those, our most popular offering by far are the major discounts that we offer on our training programs. So if you are interested in studying astrology at Nightlight in 2025, whether you're a brand new student or a currently enrolled student who's thinking of taking one of our year 2, 3 horary programs, you're going to find that these are the best rates that we run on the entire year. And we do this as a way of both saying thank you and also of helping us raise funds to support the channel, our staff, and everything we do. So you'll see attend one Nightlight course there. That's about 50% off the total cost of the program and about $500 off the early bird rate. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see that if you bundle 2 courses together, the savings go way up. Bundle 3, they go up even more. I mean, the difference between the 2 and 3 class package is $200. So $200 more, you get 3 of our year-long programs. And if you get all the way to the 4 class pass, then you have all 4 years of our program. You can take them at any pace you like, renew them whenever you like. There's no timeline on when you use these class passes. And you will have all 4 years of content at about 75% off each of the programs individually when you get that bundle. So those are our best savings for sure. Highly recommend those. If you have any questions about our courses or programs, email us info@nightlightastrology.com or look at the website under the courses page. You'll find information about each of the individual courses we offer. And then if you scroll up, you're going to find some of our other programs that are greatly discounted. Ashley's Herbal Foundations apprenticeship course, which many people are interested in who come through our Moon Circle that Ashley and I lead each month. You scroll up, you're going to find our Masterclass series for 2025, greatly discounted, as well as our Roots and Spheres Moon Circle, greatly discounted. There's hundreds of dollars of savings in each of those. So we really try to make sure that the Kickstarter acts as a good flash sale for all of our programs. You'll then find some really nice prices on previous archive talks, like our 2024 archive masterclass bundle, which is about 30 hours worth of content on specialized topics in astrology. You can see the topics listed in each of the bundles as you scroll through. 2023's masterclass bundle, huge savings on those and a lot of really great content. You'll see a few reading options as you continue to go from the bottom to the top. You'll see the 2025 year ahead mini reading. There's only 30 of these. These are individualized birth chart readings that I do, looking at the most significant transit in your birth chart for 2025. I record those personally. You'll then see that there is an Ask 3 Horary Questions option where you can get 3 horary questions to redeem whenever you'd like within the year ahead. Those are kind of yes, no predictive questions. Will I get the job? Will we get together? Things like that. Then you'll see the Astrology for Complete Beginners course is also discounted through the Kickstarter. This is a great 10 hours worth of content for people who are brand new to astrology. So whether that's you or maybe a gift for somebody else. And then you're going to see some individual master classes that are greatly discounted from the past year. So all of 2024's masterclass series are the archives of which 8 to 10 hours each are on sale. And then scroll up a little bit more and you'll see one of our most popular offerings, which are the year ahead horoscope readings. These year ahead horoscope readings include 30 to 45 minutes of a breakdown of all the major transits of the year ahead for each sun and rising signs. You get all of them with this package, which is a great deal. It's like 10 hours worth of content, 8, 9, 10 hours, somewhere in there. I haven't finished recording all of them yet. So as of the time I'm recording this, I'm anticipating it'll land around 10 hours. But yeah, anyway, so you scroll up, you'll see those horoscope videos will all be delivered to you right around January 1st when the Kickstarter ends. Scroll up a little bit more, you'll find The Oracle Speaks, which is my book, and this is being released chapter by chapter. It is a book about the inner experience of learning to speak with oracles, and it is being released chapter by chapter in both text and audiobook form, so you can listen along to my new book. And that takes us up to the Astrology of 2025 video. This, for your donation at the $50 level, gives you an exclusive talk breaking down all of the major astrological transits of 2025. I look in depth at some of the biggest things happening in the year ahead and break them down in advance. And that's the only place I release that video or that take on the whole year ahead. Finally, at the very top, the most basic level of donation, you'll see the Astrology of 2025 calendar. This is a PDF calendar we design and make that allows you to track and move along with the astrology as the year unfolds. This is also great if you want to track what we're going to be talking about week by week on my channel. You'll get a glimpse at the biggest transits of each day and month and week. And that will give you some sense of where we're heading with our coverage of the astrology on the channel as the year unfolds. So again, any questions about any of the rewards that you see, email us info@nightlightastrology. Link is in the description, comments, or on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Help us get to 1,937 backers by January 1st. We deeply appreciate your contribution. We try to make sure we have some really special rewards to say thank you when you contribute. All right, take it easy. Bye.